All right, welcome. I think we are going to go ahead and get started with our health expert panel. I wanted to just begin by sharing a couple of slides with everyone today, and we're going to take a minute and just review a little bit of our WellCat services and what we do. And then myself, Dr. Besner, who is on our call today, and Miss Carolyn Swearingen, we are each going to talk a little bit about our respective fields and some of the recommendations that we have in our respective fields to just help you think about your health in maybe a different way as we're approaching this fall and spring semesters, and how we can start building some good tools to put into our wellness toolkit that can help everyone to just be more successful in their path to wellness. So I'm going to go ahead and share those slides. And let me just, can everyone see the presentation okay? Perfect. Okay, great. So just a little bit about what is WellCats. As you all hopefully know, WellCats is Texas State's employee wellness program, and this is a free benefit to all eligible employees here at Texas State. And there are a number of services that we offer as part of the WellCats umbrella. And our services are really designed to be tools for you. So as we're thinking about what are some things that I can add to my wellness toolkit and really start to feel like I have many things that I can pull from that toolkit to help support wellness, these services are places to start. So we have group exercise classes virtually every day, Monday through Friday. We also have our proactive nutrition or our pan cooking classes. And these are classes that we have every other week in the nutrition and foods lab here on campus. And it's a time for you to get hands-on cooking skills while you're also getting to know other members of WellCats. We also have one-on-one nutrition consultations. If after you hear some of our nutrition information today, you feel like you want something that's more personalized to you to help get your goals set from a nutrition perspective for the rest of this year, those consultations are available to you. We also have health behavior change coaching that Dr. Besner can probably talk a little more about and maybe will talk a little more about in her section, but this is an opportunity that if you are working on specific behavior changes and you feel like you need extra support, Dr. Besner is there for you and her team. And then we have our WellCats education series that you are participating in today. We have educational presentations that happen every month through WellCats, and it's an opportunity to take a deeper dive into some of the hot topics that are out there that you might have questions about in your wellness. So please email us if you have any questions. And you can also find on our WellCats page, the link that's here in those slides, a link to our calendar that can tell you when all these events are happening and where they're happening on campus. I'll go ahead and introduce myself first, and then I'll have my other team members jump in. But my name is Lindsay Mingy. I am an assistant professor of instruction in the Nutrition and Foods program in the School of Family and Consumer Sciences. And I am also the dietetic internship director here at Texas State and work with interns who are on their way to becoming registered dietitians. I'm also a registered and licensed dietitian and have a private practice outside of my work here at Texas State as well, where I focus on oncology nutrition. And I'm just happy to be here to talk to you all about nutrition goals and things to add to your nutrition toolkit. I'll turn it over to you, I think, Dr. Besner.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm Janet Besner. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Physical Therapy on the Round Rock campus in the College of Health Professions. I'm a licensed physical therapist. I train, educate physical therapy students, and my expertise is in health coaching and behavior change. I'm a national board certified health coach and have been a member of the WellCats team for, well, since the beginning, 2014. Good to see everybody.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Swearingen. I'm a professor of instruction in Department of Health and Human Performance. And my area of expertise is in exercise design, exercise assessment. I've been involved in wellness for over 20 years. And yeah, I teach again in the Department of Health and Human Performance, and I'll be sharing with you all the things about group exercise and physical activity, just being active daily, and exercise guidelines. So thank you for having us.
Perfect. We're going to start by talking about nutrition. And of course, I'm excited to share with you guys about nutrition. This is an area of which I have lots of passion. But I did want to say too that our goal today is to spend a little bit of time talking through some of our different areas of expertise, and then to leave a substantial portion of today for any questions that you guys have. This is really your time to get some of your burning questions around any of these areas of health answered by us, or to the best of our ability. We can point you in the direction of answers. And so with that, I wanted to first just review a little bit of kind of the overarching foundational principles to nutrition and health. And one of the things that we really know about health is that diet and consistent exercise are really the cornerstones of preventing chronic health conditions from occurring and being exacerbated when they are present. And really, there are few areas of health that nutrition cannot have a substantial impact and make an important difference in promoting your wellness. But there are many different factors that influence our health, but the ones that we are really going to focus on two that we can have the most change in, which is our dietary practices, physical activity, and I think we'll touch on stress in here as well too. When we think about nutrition, our real evidence-based framework that we work within on what makes a healthy diet is something called MyPlate. Probably you have seen this before, but I really wanted to talk about the power of MyPlate, because this is an area that we often, we get sort of distracted by the noise around nutrition, and we forget just these core principles, which is really thinking about plants comprising the majority of our plate. We're thinking about half our plate is fruits and vegetables, about another quarter is going to be from our grains, and in particular whole grains, and then about another quarter is going to be comprised of protein. The idea around MyPlate is that we're including foods that are high in nutrients, and it's a term that we refer to as nutrient density, which I'll talk about a little bit more, rather than foods that are higher in calories, or maybe that have empty calories is a term that you might have heard a lot out there. So we're including those whole grains, and then we're limiting things like added sugars, saturated fats, and sodium that are what drive calories up but don't really give us a lot of nutrition. So when we think about that practically, I always really love demonstrating what is nutrient density. And so this picture is just to really kind of visualize that for you in a simplistic way. But when we think about the foods that we're consuming, we want to opt for foods that in their composition, for the calories that they're going to require for us to consume them, that we're getting lots and lots of different nutrients out of those calories. So if we look at something like milk as an example, if we're having, a glass of milk, whatever calories are in that milk, we're having lots more nutrients that are part of that composition of that food. Versus if we were to consume something like a soda, which has, calories as well, but there's nothing else there, really. We're not getting anything else that supports our health by consuming that food. So does that mean that can never be part of our diet? No, I don't want you to think that. But it's just that we want the majority of the foods that we are consuming on a regular basis to be from this more nutrient dense category. And why is this really important? Well, part of why it's really important is because in today's food world, we are seeing more and more foods that are that are more processed and have nutrients that would make them dense taken out of those foods as they are moving across this spectrum of processing. So the idea here is we want to have more foods that are in this unprocessed or minimally processed category, where again, we're retaining more of those essential nutrients, versus having a lot of foods that are on this ultra processed spectrum that maybe you're coming more from packaged foods or foods that have had those added sugars or things along those lines in their ingredients. And so when we think about this in terms of how are we doing with our ultra processed food versus unprocessed or minimally processed food consumption, the average American is consuming more than 50% of their calories per day from ultra processed foods versus we're getting about 30% of our calories from minimally or unprocessed. And we really want to see the flip of that. And so the idea for today is just thinking about how can you maybe move a little bit more towards that flip. How can we just get a little bit more of these unprocessed or minimally processed foods into your day? And why does that really matter? Well, that matters because when we think about the types of foods that are minimally or unprocessed, they tend to be our plants, lots of fruits and vegetables, and that's really a key to a healthy diet. Why is it a key to a healthy diet? Well, we see that when more servings of fruits and vegetables are present in someone's diet and consistently part of their diet, we see reductions in all of our major chronic health conditions. The ones that really impact us at the highest level are greatly reduced when we have more of these types of foods present. So that adage of eat your fruits and vegetables, when your parents were telling you that when you were a kid, that's really it. That is such a simple truth to our health. And so what makes our fruits and vegetables or our plants so special? They contain lots of important nutrients. They are in particular rich in things like phytonutrients, which the color of the fruits and vegetables that we consume are what's telling us that they're rich in those phytonutrients. So the more variety of fruits and vegetables you have is great. They also contain fiber, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, but fiber is magical for our health. And then it also means that when we have more fruits and vegetables, we tend to not have as much room for animal fats and other processed foods. So something that I would pose to you as a goal to think about is to really focus on diversity of your fruits and vegetables. If you're somebody that you just kind of focus on the same, you're eating, maybe you have broccoli every single day, I would just encourage you, keep the broccoli there. I love the broccoli, but try some other variety of fruits and vegetables. Right now, we're about to get into where we have tons of different squash varieties and tons of different fall produce that if you haven't been putting that in your cart, maybe try that over the next few months. We also want to aim for somewhere around 6 to 10 servings of vegetables per day, but a great way to think about that is just going back to my plate, where half that plate is comprised of fruits and vegetables. That's a great way to start amping up the nutrient density of your foods. And I would also say opt for sustainable changes. A lot of times when we hear health information, it's like we try to do it all at once. And focus on those step-by-step things that you could add in. Maybe it's just an extra cup of vegetables that you're focusing on this week. And then maybe next week you try adding different varieties in. Some other recommendations that I would have is trying things like meatless days. A lot of people do things like meatless Mondays, where they opt to stick with like plant-based proteins on a given day. And that helps to just enhance the quality of their diet all week long by focusing more on plants in one particular day. Another recommendation is starting early. Maybe you guys can put it in the chat, but do you ever have vegetables in the morning? If so, what do you do? How do you like to do it? It might be something as simple as maybe you make salsa and you have eggs with salsa. Or maybe you chop a tomato up or you do some, kale with your breakfast in the morning. But I'd love to hear some of the things that have worked for all of you. Eating with the season is a great way to get more nutrient density in your life and that variety that we were talking about that's really important to health. We are, really in that time of fall produce. So it's a great way to try some of those new varieties that you maybe haven't put in your cart in a while. Swap out things that are your refined carbohydrates for more whole grains. Things like whole grain pasta versus white pastas. Oftentimes you don't really even notice the difference. But it's helping to get more of those nutrient dense components in our grains into your diet. Loading up on some of your favorite recipes. So I put a couple of different recipe sites here for you that have really great recipes in them. But if you have some favorite recipes that you're already working with, have you ever tried sneaking more vegetables into them? I do this all the time with things like tomato sauces or soups. You know, if whatever the amount of produce was for that particular recipe, I'll just double it, or I'll, put an extra cup or two in there. And that can make a huge difference that typically is pleasing to the whole family. They might not notice if you have some extra vegetables in that tomato sauce. And then using herbs and spices for flavor is a great way to just make those vegetables and other recipes that you have even more exciting. And then boosting your snacks, not forgetting that that could be a great place to add more nutrient density. So adding in fruit with your snack, or, putting some celery or cucumber in with whatever else that you're having. A few other tools and tips are thinking about moving some of your fruits and vegetables to where they're more visible. Do you ever feel like you forget that fruits and vegetables are even there in your fridge, and then you're like, oh yeah, we have that? The more that you keep them to the front of the refrigerator, the more they're going to be in eyesight for you, so they're easier to find. Keeping a fruit bowl on the table. There is research that shows that just having these be more visible to you will make it easier for you to remember to consume them. Stocking your freezer, freezing produce or getting frozen produce is a great way to still retain the nutrients in those foods, but be able to have them where they're not going to waste and you can just access them as needed. Trying to load up more on your fresh veggies by swapping meat with plant proteins can be a really great way for, again, like a meatless Monday to happen. You could try adding vegetables to hummus or bean spreads on sandwiches to, again, focus more on plants. And then even something as simple as reducing your sugar sweetened beverage consumption. That can be huge for moving to a more nutrient dense diet. So trying things like unsweet teas or sparkling waters even, and coffee are great substitutes. Why am I talking more about having more plants in your diet is not that meat needs to be the enemy, certainly not, but how we can think about just having a more plant forward diet. And there are lots of reasons for that. One is just from a sustainability perspective, it is good for our environment to have less animal proteins in our diet. And we also do know that in particular that red and processed meats, studies have shown that they can increase our risk of certain types of cancers, as well as type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So thinking about more like a flexitarian pyramid or flexitarian lifestyle where animal proteins are a smaller portion of your foods throughout the week and that plants are more of the focus is a great way to just naturally increase nutrient density in your diet. The last thing that I want to touch on before I turn it over to Dr. Besner is thinking about fiber. Fiber is incredible for many reasons, but one is that it can increase your sense of satiety and fullness. So when you consume certain foods, it can be really great for helping you to manage things like daily caloric intake. But it is also fantastic for things like your bowel function and for blood glucose management and having more blood sugar control. So fiber is incredible. And we, as an American population, we tend to underconsume pretty substantially our recommendations for fiber. So for women, 25 grams per day is the recommendation, and for men, 38 grams per day. So what could that look like? Well, I included here just a sample menu that if you all want to take a look at that, you're welcome to. But I also wanted to just talk about what are some easy ways to increase fiber consumption without necessarily having to track everything that you consume. One is to think more complex carbohydrates. So our whole grains are where our fiber has remained intact and hasn't been removed in processing. So including whole grains like whole grain breads, whole grain pastas, brown rice, quinoa, other types of grains, like there's millet and kamut and many types of grains out there. So playing around with some of those can be a great way to increase your fiber intake. Also things like seeds. So, sunflower seeds, chia seeds, nuts are all great ways to get a little bit more fiber. Thinking more about focusing on fruits and vegetables when you're at your mealtime. Fruits and vegetables are very high in fiber as well. And then one of my kind of easy tricks is thinking about that when I am looking at a label per serving of a grain, I like to see that there's at least 4 grams of fiber there. Another kind of rule of thumb is 10 to 1. So for every 10 grams of carbohydrates on a label, that you have at least 1 gram of fiber per those 10 grams of carbohydrates. And I included here both soluble and insoluble fiber. I get asked questions about that a lot, like, which should I be consuming more of? And really it's just yes, it's great. Both are great. And so when you consume lots of plants, you're going to get a variety of both types of fibers in your diet. So the more you just focus on plants and fresh fruits and vegetables, the more you're getting a great variety of these fibers that are important for your health.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Excellent tools. All right, everyone, we're going to shift the focus a little bit and talk about the role of motivation and habit formation in your toolkit and in engaging in these habits. You can go to the next slide. So we're going to start with motivation. Motivation is really what is driving us to achieve any goal or desire. And there's 2 types of motivation that are important: intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is when there's something inside you, some kind of important thing, some kind of value, some kind of interest that aligns with the goal or task. And extrinsic motivation is when there's something outside of you, something external to you, such as money, status, fear, your partner, your physician, pointing the finger at you and suggesting that you do something. So you can go to the next slide. So the important thing about doing these health habits is that we need to find an intrinsic motivator, because the extrinsic motivators can be useful to get us to start a new habit or stop a bad habit, but they don't maintain or sustain our behavior over time. So I like to think about, what are the things in my life that are most important to me? What is most important to me? And as a department head, there are so many important things. It's hard for me to sort of narrow that down, but it's important to me to do a good job. It's important to me to support my students. It's important to me to support our faculty and our employees and their health and wellness. It's important that I'm a model of health and wellness and that I'm engaging in these healthy things. So when I think about these habits, I think about, well, what about these habits serves me best? And so I love Lindsay's suggestion. She was just talking about food, and I love food. I love all food. I'm totally a foodie. And when I'm selecting food to eat, I think about, what do I need to do today? Like, what is life calling on me to do today? And that really can influence what I choose to eat if I do have choices, which I'm lucky enough to have. So I think about food as fuel to help me achieve my highest aspirations and goals. That is an internal motivator. Now, some days the world isn't asking much of me. So I might have something that's less nutritious, and that's perfectly fine, as Lindsay said. But most days I am being called to do something that is going to influence another person or another group of people. And so I try to make choices that will put me in the best position to do well in that circumstance. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's motivation. And then motivation becomes part of this habit formation equation. And I like this simple formula. It's very easy to understand. It's from a psychology professor named B.J. Fogg, and he wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And he wrote this equation, which is behavior, is equal to MAP, motivation and ability and prompt. So for every behavior you want to create and sustain over time, you need to think about the motivation. We just talked about that, and find an intrinsic motivator. You need to know how to do it. And so Lindsay just talked about eating certain types of foods and certain types of foods that are better for you. Well, some of those require some ability to select, identify, cook. And so you need to have that ability. Same with physical activity, which Carolyn's going to talk about in a minute. You need to know how to do, how to stretch properly, how to do resistance training properly. So ability, we can all help you there by helping you with resources around ability. And then the last thing is a prompt. And you can think of that as a reminder or a cue. So again, Lindsay gave the example of putting a bowl of fruit on the table where you see it. That would be the equivalent of a prompt. Some people put their tennis shoes right at the door, so they have to fall over them or trip over them as they walk out, so they'll remember to bring them. Maybe you bring a bag to work that has some exercise clothes that you can get a little sweaty or moist in. So prompts are really important to our development of habits because they remind us. Sometimes people will put reminders in their calendars. Go to a WellCats class. So prompt is a very important part of this habit formation. And then last slide, or almost last slide. Go ahead, Lindsay. Yeah. So there's also some other science around habit formation. This information is from a guy named James Clear, Clear, and he wrote the book Atomic Habits. And he said, if you're going to start a healthy habit, you need to think of 4 things. Make it attractive, right? So whatever that means to you, make it attractive. Maybe that's fun, maybe that's easy, maybe that's sexy, I don't know. Make it attractive to you so you'll do it. Make it satisfying. There's lots of ways to make healthy food taste interesting and unique and flavorful, for example. There's lots of physical activity that actually feels good when you're doing it. So make it satisfying, make it easy. We have a motto in the WellCats program: make the healthy choice the easy choice. That's based on this science. So try to make it easy. And then finally, make it visible. Keep it in front of you, literally and figuratively, however that works for you. Maybe, again, a reminder or something else. The opposite is true if you're trying to break an unhealthy habit, like maybe snacking in front of the TV or getting up at night and seeing what's in the fridge. Make that harder. So, put the food in the way back, hide it in some obscure place. I don't know. That could be a problem, I guess, over time, but make it unsatisfying, make it difficult, put it out of your eyesight. All of those things can help you break an unhealthy habit. And so if you do these things over time, then eventually, hopefully, the habit becomes intrinsically rewarding and you can see what it's doing for your well-being and for your important goals and aspirations. And you won't need these prompts, you won't need these monikers, and you can continue to benefit from the habit. So those are some ideas for your toolbox around making these things habitual. And I look forward to your questions after Carolyn talks. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, one more slide. Okay, there's a couple of other tools that you can think about. Habit stacking. I really like this idea. Habit stacking is pairing a habit that you already have. So let's say brushing your teeth, fixing lunch for your kids or for yourself. Try to stack a new habit you're trying to develop with a habit you already have. That can be a really powerful way to get it onto your plate, especially for people who feel like they don't have time. Repetition is awesome. So start small, just do one part of something healthy and then add to it every day. You don't have to go all or none. That's really a pretty unsuccessful way to make a habit. So start small, repeat it until you start to see the benefits of it. And think about the benefits of these healthy habits we're suggesting. How are they how are they positively influencing you? Are they helping you think more clearly? Are they giving you more energy? Are they helping you sleep more? If you can also think about those things, then that will help you also develop that intrinsic motivation. And then just as a reminder, try to connect these habits to the most important things to you. And if you can do that, you'll find that they're easier to get in your schedule and prioritize.
Hi, thank you, Janet. Um, so I'm going to speak with y'all about exercise and exercise guidelines for adults. And what we're going to look at is really, like Janet was talking about, starting small. So we're going to start small or start low and build on that. So first thing I want to share with you is just the bare minimum. This is the guidelines that we have, that everyone we want to strive to do on a weekly basis. And that's 150 minutes of physical activity, at least 5 days a week. So that number can seem big, it can feel overwhelming. But what I want to share with you is research suggests that it can even be broken down into small 10-minute bouts of physical activity. And those small incremental bouts adding up to that 30 minutes a day or 150 through the week we will see results with that. So I want you not to be overwhelmed by the number of 150, and think about ways that you can be active for at least 10 minutes at a time throughout the day, to achieve at least 30 minutes daily or 150 throughout the week. So that's that. And here on this next slide, this is going to take us a step further. American College of Sports Medicine guidelines for the adult. We get beyond just aerobic physical activity, and we dive more into resistance training or strength training, muscular endurance training, flexibility training, and neuromotor exercise as well. And you're going to see as we go through these slides that there's some overlap in them. For example, neuromotor exercise or activity can be seen in resistance training and activities for enhancing flexibility. So we'll talk about that. For aerobic activity, again, we want to have at least 30 minutes of moderate activity 5 days a week, or at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise 3 days a week. This infographic I really like. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by it, but let me hone in on what I'd like you to focus on. So again, 150. Okay, so that's the bare minimum. But if you achieve that, we start small, we build up, and we go beyond that. Then what we're looking at is upwards of 300 minutes of moderate intensity, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous exercise. And the tool that I like to use and teach for understanding, are we exercising at a moderate level or are we at a vigorous level? How do we know that? Well, I like to use the talk test. And so if you're happen to be exercising or being physically active with someone else, if you were able to carry on a conversation like I'm doing right now, or very close to that, maybe with just a pretty steady conversation, then that's considered to be moderate physical activity, moderate aerobic exercise. However, if you have to pause, take some breaths, and make pauses between your conversation, then we're going to look at that more as a vigorous bout of exercise. So I really like to use the talk test. And you can see that these guidelines here take us above and beyond, again, the minimum of the 150 of moderate. And then we have a variation into the vigorous activity. There's also other ways to monitor exercise heart rate, perceived effort using the RPE scale. For example, on a scale of 0 to 10, how hard do you feel like you're working out? Somewhat hard, that's going to be a 3 or a 4. and that's your moderate activity. But if you feel like you're exercising at an 8 or a 9, then you're really at close to max effort, and you're not going to be able to sustain that for very long. That's why those guidelines for vigorous exercise is not as lengthy, or as the duration is not as long as moderate. We have lots of tools available, watches and different apps and stuff that can monitor heart rate throughout the day, as well as sensor our steps throughout the day. So you can also do something like that. And there are some examples. For example, moderate intensity is 100 steps a minute, or 1,000 steps in 10 minutes. So that's another way that you can measure physical activity. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. There, Lindsay, thank you. Now, this gets into our second component of physical activity, which is resistance training. Resistance training is going to help us increase our muscular strength, our muscular endurance. And there's many, many benefits that we receive from training resistance training. So that can include management of arthritis, cardiovascular disease, depression. I mean, the list goes on and on. Resistance training is so important for everyone, and especially women as we age. So we have our, let me scroll down here. When you're working out and wanting to train with resistance and increase your muscular strength and your muscular endurance, you can use your own body weight. That's a great way to start. There's lots of activities that you can do using body weight to begin with. But as you advance, you can use dumbbells or resistance bands. The guidelines for resistance training is selecting 8 to 10 exercises that target multi-joint. So, for example, you could have a squat. Okay, so a squat is a multi-joint exercise. It's going to target major muscle groups with one movement, performing 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions. So, for example, I'll stand up here. Hopefully you can see me. But if we were conducting a bicep curl, so let's pretend I have my dumbbells in my hand and I'm doing a curl up and down. So this is 1 repetition. I'll complete 8 to 12 of these at my own pace, as many as I can perform, to the point of what we call volitional fatigue. Reaching volitional fatigue is that momentary break, inability to continue movement. So I would conduct 8 to 12 of those and then rest. I would cycle through my exercises, starting with my larger muscle groups and working to my smaller muscle groups, or alternating between lower body and upper body, and completing 2 to 3 sets. That might seem a little overwhelming at first, but remember our motto, we're going to start low and go slow. So we're going to slowly and gradually build up over time. We want to make sure that we breathe during resistance training. We never want to hold our breath. So we use our breath to control our movement, and slow and controlled breathing will help us safely and effectively execute these exercises. And we want to perform resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to that next slide. So now we are looking at flexibility. Guidelines for flexibility is at least going to be 2 to 3 days a week. And this is really targeted stretching or targeted flexibility classes or time dedicated towards this. I do want to encourage that there is stretching after all forms of activity. It's a great way to cool down your body and just help prevent injury. But for example, if you were to engage in a yoga class or a stretching class, this would be a great way to add to your flexibility and help meet those guidelines. So for flexibility stretching, you're going to want to target each major joint So stretching the hamstrings, the glutes, across the shoulders. So here's an example. We'll just pull that right arm across the shoulder. We want to make sure that shoulders drop down. Place the arm above the elbow so we're not applying pressure to that joint. We're going to hold that for about 30 seconds. Okay. And then we would switch and go to the other side. So holding at least 10 seconds up to 30 seconds is a great amount of time to hold each stretch. You should feel it to a point of slight discomfort, but you should never feel pain with stretching. There's other examples of stretching that can be done, but I just want to focus there on that static stretching that you can hold yourself. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Neuromuscular exercise. So this is incorporating this is just the muscle brain connection here, helping to improve balance and coordination, which is a very important key for us, especially as we continue to age. We want to maintain our balance and coordination, have good muscle memory. So exercises that require us to have some repetitive movement on, like, for example, one leg. So we could do a standing, one-legged standing bicep curl, all of our weight shifted onto our left foot, right knee is raised, and we're conducting a bicep curl while maintaining on one leg. So this is a way that we can build our musculoskeletal training and just improve our balance and our coordination over time. Another example would be a yoga class, conducting different poses and postures, moving through those in a fluid manner will help enhance our neuromuscular connection there. All right, let's just go on to the next slide. And here's a big piece. We're talking about scheduled physical activity, being active throughout our day. But really, on the flip side of that is just limiting sedentary time. If we can think about easy ways to move our body more throughout the day, we're just going to set ourselves up for a healthier life. So, for example, standing while responding to emails, walking while you're taking a call. I threw in calf raises while brushing your teeth, or I like to do squats while I'm loading the dishwasher. So whatever it might be, and as crazy as you might look, the better. That might mean that you're being more active. So limiting sedentary behavior is just the flip side of this, and we want to do that as much as possible. And then the final slide that Lindsay really kind of already alluded to is I just wanted to share with you a snapshot of our group exercise schedule, a short description of the classes that we have. And for the most up-to-date resource or most up-to-date link to our classes and our activities, of course, our Wellcats link to events is going to take you there. So thank you for the time. I think at this time, we're going to turn it over for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn. So as Carolyn mentioned, what we're going to do now is really just let you guys ask any questions that you have or that you have been wanting to get answered around health and wellness. Hopefully we can do our best to answer those questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you'd rather type questions in the chat, that's okay too. Whatever is easiest for you. So Leah asks, how do we feel about zero everything energy drinks? There's a lot to this question, and I think I'll start, and then if either of you want to chime in on this end as well, you're welcome to. But there's a time and a place for them. I would say kind of my general feedback would be moderation. And why I'm saying that is because if you're someone who has relied on having a soda every day, and that's something that is really a regular occurrence for you, and you are working to make changes to reduce your consumption of sugar sweetened beverages, then I certainly think something like a 0 calorie, soda or 0 calorie drink could make sense there as you're moving towards less of those types of beverages in your life. But if you're somebody who has already been making those changes for, some time, and you're feeling confident about the fact that you're primarily consuming water or tea or something along those lines, then I would recommend thinking as small a moderation of our zero everything drinks as you can. High caffeinated drinks can sometimes be difficult for some people. Some of us maybe on this call really handle caffeine well, but lots of caffeine over time can lead to things like heart palpitations or anxiety or shakiness in your hands, you may have noticed before. So limiting our high caffeine intake that can be in those energy drinks is something to be mindful of. And then I would also say with artificial sweeteners, there's kind of mixed evidence around artificial sweeteners. And so I would say in moderation, great, but we have some concerns around artificial sweeteners from the standpoint of their effects on our microbiome, which is our healthy bacteria in our gastrointestinal system. And then also from the standpoint of there is some literature that there may be some impact on things like cardiovascular health with high intake of artificial sweeteners. So I would just say moderation when it comes to those types of drinks. And then Chris is asking any recommended caffeine substitutes. My main thing would be, so it would depend on what your caffeine tolerance is. So, a great swap of like high caffeine energy drinks or even coffee, if you're sensitive, is switching to something like a green tea or something along those lines that has some caffeine in it, but it's not to the same degree. And then the nice part about things like green tea is it's high and rich in phytonutrients that I was talking about earlier in our presentation. So it has some really great benefits from just a health perspective. All things in moderation though, right? Not if we're having 12 cups of green tea a day, it might be a little bit too much, but a small amount can be a really great way to get phytonutrients and other more minor amounts of caffeine into your diet. But also if you're trying to eliminate caffeine entirely, then I would recommend, decaffeinated teas, sparkling waters. There's so many great unsweetened sparkling waters that are out there now that are flavored naturally, and that can be things like Rambler or Waterloo or Topo Chico or some of those other unflavored waters that still have really nice crispness to them. And then another question is, I've been reading a lot of different recommendations about how much protein I should be eating per day. Great. So our current guidelines are that for the average American, you would consume, the recommendation is 0.8 grams of protein per day per kilogram of body weight. And so, if you're let's say you're a 150-pound individual, the recommendation for you would be somewhere around 60 grams of protein per day. Now that's for the average American. So it also depends on what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve when you are, including protein. So thank you for putting that in the chat, Janet, I appreciate that. So if you are someone who is exercising more, or you might have something like some weight management goals that you're aiming for, if that is going on, then your protein recommendations might be a little bit higher. But it just depends on the complexities of who you are and what are your goals. So what I would recommend is if you are aiming for a particular recommendation, I would highly recommend coming to one of our nutrition counseling sessions and being able to have one of our WellCats nutrition team be able to assess that based off of what's going on for your specific goals and needs. But that's the general recommendation that Janet's put there in the chat. So would I recommend using stevia instead of sugar? So stevia is a plant-derived sweetener, so it is considered more of a natural sweetener. We have seen fewer implications from using stevia in your foods and in your drinks than some of our other artificial sweeteners, but I'd still recommend the same guidelines here, which is just to think moderation with any of those artificial sweeteners and opting more often for other types of drinks. Carolyn, I had a question for you. When you were talking, something that I was wondering was what your thoughts are on, if you just haven't been doing a regular exercise routine and you are just trying to get started, what would you recommend that look like for someone?
Just getting started. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just to get started, I would start with that trying to achieve just that bare minimum 30 minutes a day, like of that moderate to vigorous activity. If starting off moderate activity for sure. So just trying to, even if it's 3 10-minute bouts of walking, in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening, or, walking in the evening after work once you get home or something, I would start there. In terms of resistance training or, building your muscular strength, building up your musculature, I would start with body weight exercises. So this might look like a push-up for you. Maybe we're not doing a full push-up on the ground, but we're utilizing a stable surface like a desk when we're inverted and at an angle and doing body weight push-ups at that way, or maybe even against a wall. Calf raises, leg lifts, lunges, anything to work on building up our muscles, and then stretching. So those would be some very basic ways to get started. That's not going to require any equipment. You don't have to go out and spend money. You don't have to have all of these things perfect to be physically active and increase your health and wellness. You can use your own body and you'll get a lot achieved in that way. That help answer?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Oh, Leah, I see another question. How much red meat would be considered healthy? So one time a week. She says, I mostly eat chicken, but sometimes I cook the 90% beef with veggie pasta or make a burger bowl and wasn't sure if that's considered a healthy amount. Absolutely. That's great. What I would say is that where we're most concerned with our red meat consumption is in particular with processed meats. So things like pepperoni or things like, beef sausages or many of those red meats that also tend to have added sugars and lots of sodium to them. And so something like a lean ground beef, like you're mentioning here, and that a couple of times a week is certainly appropriate to have in a healthy diet. And the other thing I would say is you also want to consider where you are in your health. So if there are some things that you're being mindful of or that are being monitored for you, things like, higher cholesterol, or if you, are managing something like cardiovascular disease, then that recommendation would be different. So it would just be based off of where you are in your health. But for the average individual who isn't monitoring some of those other conditions, this would be a perfectly reasonable amount of red meat to consume in a week. And the other thing that I really love about what you put there, Leah, is you're also consuming other great foods with that. So, we go back to that nutrient density component of the presentation, which is that, you know, you're having the 90% beef, but you're pairing it with a veggie pasta. Or this burger bowl sounds like it probably has, you know, lots of veggies in that bowl. And so thinking about too, just if I'm sitting down to have something, what can I put with it that just enhances the nutrient density of that plate? And that's a really great way too that, you know, maybe you're not in a place yet where you feel like paring down on some of your favorite foods. I understand that we all have to start somewhere. So if you're not in a place yet where you're ready to make that kind of change, then when you look at that plate of your, you know, that has some of your favorite foods on it, add something else to it that helps to improve the nutrient density. So put some veggies on that plate with it, or have a piece of fruit alongside whatever it is that, you know, you're consuming. And then that's another great way to start building in some of those healthy habits, that once we start building those in more and more, then there's just less room for some of the other, you know, components that might be ones that we want to start having more in moderation. Any other final questions? Okay, great. Well, I am just going to take a minute and say thank you so much for coming and attending this presentation today. We are all available. If you have any other questions that you didn't feel comfortable asking today, feel free to email me or any of our other team, and we're happy to get back with you. And then again, I would just point you to our classes, and I really hope to see you there at some of our other offerings that can support some of these changes that we talked about today.